Sanjeev Sanyal, I want to ask you, when the government, through the GST Council, raises rates of lassi, curd, paneer, rice, wheat, flour, jaggery, honey, papad, meat and fish, along with hotel rooms below 1,000 rupees a day, hospital rooms above 5,000 rupees a day, somewhere or the other, it is something that could have waited, because popular sentiment, as you said, during these turbulent times is rather subdued, and secondly, the unemployment rate that we are seeing, worrying for people who are coming out of a COVID situation, a pandemic situation, and still looking for jobs. Do you think it's badly timed, apart from being a huge burden? I come back to that question because that's really what matters to the citizens of India.
So there are two questions here, one relating to the timing of these GST changes and the other relates to unemployment. So I'll answer them separately. First of all, when is a good time to do these changes? We have, do remember that this is not something that the central government is doing. It is a GST Council which does it. By the way, 2/3 of the weightage in the GST Council is that of the states. And there are continuous changes happening. Whether a specific change should have been done now or not, it's a matter of the political leadership to take a call on that. My role is that of technically advising whether or not those changes should be done, and from what I understand, that they were reasonable changes to be done. One can debate them one or the other, but they are not irrational changes to be done. The timing of it, well, that is up to the political leaderships, both at the center and the state, to take a call on it. That's not for me to comment. Now, as far as inflation, as far as unemployment is concerned, let me say that it is a perennial problem we have had for a long, long time. But even in this count, let me say that the key driver of job creation has got to be growth. I am not a votary, by the way, of this idea of jobless growth at all. High growth is necessary to suck in people into the job market, and particularly into the formal job market. And here, if you look at the EPFO data that has been put together in the last few months, you can clearly see that formal jobs are getting created at an unprecedented rate. In fact, there are certain areas of the economy where there are shortages, for example, in the IT sector. But even otherwise, we can see that even in the government sector, as you know, the Prime Minister has announced recently that there are vacancies, and a major effort is being put in to fill those vacancies on a rapid basis. You're seeing investments coming in from the PLI scheme, which are all creating jobs already in the manufacturing sector. So sure, there is always a slack in our job market because of the way the demographics are set up, and of course the transition out of agriculture into other sectors is always an issue. But I think given the big shock we had in the last 2 years from COVID, as sectors have opened up, I think we have demonstrated that our supply side can deal with it. I mean, just to give you an example, as the civil aviation sector has come back around the world, you see what is happening to airports in the US or Europe or Canada, and compare it to what we are doing here. We are managing the reflation of the civil aviation sector almost in our stride. Meanwhile, whether it's Heathrow or JFK, they have huge delays and breakdowns that certainly not happening here.
And I want to ask you the question on bad loans. I read an article recently which pointed out to numbers that defaults to Indian banks has risen more than tenfold over the past decade, from 23,000 crore on the 31st of March 2012 to about 2.4 lakh crore on 31st of May this year. Do you think this is a figure that would worry you?
I would say our banking system has been very substantially cleaned up. Many of those numbers which you're going back to a decade ago, do remember that the loans that went back subsequently were being given out at that time. It takes some time for loans to go bad. Instead, what has happened in the last decade is because of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, we have begun to recognize the loans that were going bad rather than evergreening them. We actually let them go bust. We liquidate where necessary. So the fact that the bad loans are being liquidated, are being recognized, are also, remember, we are provisioning for them. So after doing all of that, the net NPA situation of our banking system is much, much better than it's been in years. If anything, our banks are in reasonably good shape. And for the first time in years, they're beginning to also lend quite aggressively. So if you please look at the latest numbers on bank credit, it's running somewhere in the 13.5% per year-on-year basis, which is a good, healthy rate of growth for our banking system. So I think far from being a problem, our banking system has and reforms have actually worked.
Well,